Hello everyone, let's review the results of May's 3-card blind main event tournament. This month we had a strong turnout of 358 players, 85 of which were brand new players to the main event. If you're a new player watching this video right now, thank you for trying the format and I hope to see you again next month. Among the 358 submissions, there were 257 unique decks. If we weigh the cards in these decks by their performance and run them through the Simpsons Diversity Index, you would see that this month was similarly diverse to last month. The 3-card blind diversity grade for this month was a B+. Now, I suspect that there are some players that might be surprised to hear that this month was similarly diverse to last month because there was a clear power outlier. This was the first month where cards from Secrets of Strixhaven were legal, and the set brought with it an absolute powerhouse of a threat for the 3-card blind format, which was Slumbering Trudge. This is a card that many players identified as being clearly relevant for the format, which I think is in part because at baseline it looks like a side grade to Sleep Curse Fairy. If you cast this card with X equals 0 as if it were a 1-drop, you trade off evasion and some resistance to single target removal to have a much higher potential threat. However, on closer inspection, you might come to realize that Slumbering Trudge doesn't trade off as much as you might think it does. A lot of the popular removal in the format is specifically aimed at dealing with smaller creatures, like Pyrokinesis and Dismember. Now, some players dug a little deeper on Slumbering Trudge and considered, what if we actually bought into this paying X thing and don't use it as a 1-drop? If you cast Slumbering Trudge off of Hickory Woodlot, it offers some additional advantages, like having extra mana available to pay for an opponent's days, or to change how much mana you're putting into Slumbering Trudge so that it can get through a mental misstep. This brings us to our other big meta shakeup this month, which was that Boseiju Who Endures was legal again for the first time since September of 2024. Boseiju is a very powerful piece of removal, but its combination with Hickory Woodlot and Slumbering Trudge offers Slumbering Trudge even more optionality. You get to dodge Daze and Mental Misstep by playing Hickory Woodlot, have the ability to lock an opponent out of the game by using Boseiju to destroy a land, and Boseiju can be played as a land itself to allow you to deploy Slumbering Trudge on turn 1 to dodge your opponent's Inquisition of Kozilek if they are going second. This deck was very good, and it was the most popular deck this month, and Slumbering Trudge was generically good with many different pairings, including itself. This led to Slumbering Trudge being the most popular card this month and represented roughly 1/6 of the meta. This meant that decks that were prepared to deal with Slumbering Trudge, often by just playing a deck that takes advantage of the fact that it stays asleep for a few turns, were positioned extraordinarily well in this meta. As we move on to discussing our winners, I think it's worth keeping in mind Slumbering Trudge and the impact it had on the meta even in pods where it didn't win. In Novice 4, our winner was Yumi Frost, who was playing Ancient Tomb, Time Vault, and Voltaic Servant. This is a classic deck enabled by Ancient Tomb that sets up a combo allowing it to take an arbitrarily large number of turns that wins the game against any opponent who had their shields down for the first couple of turns. In Novice 3, we had a tie between Weapon 100 and Heru. Weapon 100 was playing Emrakul the Aeon's Torn, Saprazan Cove, and Show and Tell. Show and Tell was just a little bit too slow in metas just a few months ago. Many of the fastest decks in the format have been banned, and with Slumbering Trudge being both very popular and very sleepy, Show and Tell decks, even with no defenses available to them, were simply able to wait out the timer on Saprazan Cove and slam Emrakul onto the table. Heru was playing Hickory Woodlot, Slumbering Trudge, Slumbering Trudge. There are definitely risks to running Hickory Woodlot, like you could run into a Tabernacle that is going to just lock you out of the game, But in the context of this pod, the choice to run Hickory Woodlot earned this deck an extra win against a Mental Misstep deck. In Novice 2, our winner was Tixie Buff, who was playing Emrakul the Aeon's Torn, Sand Silos, and Show and Tell. This is nearly the same deck that we just saw, but it's using Sand Silos instead of Suprazenkov. A question that new players often have is there really a meaningful difference? And the answer is sometimes. Secrets of Strixhaven notably released Petrified Hamlet, which is a land that will turn off Suprazenkov but not Sand Silos. And the follow-up question might be, if Suprazenkov has a weakness that Sand Silos doesn't have, is there ever a reason to run Suprazenkov? And the advantage to using the Suprazenkov type lands is that they can be held up to threaten casting an instant or a card with flash while still being able to bank mana in the turn cycle if you didn't cast those cards. If you're running a card like Solitude, you might consider running Fountain of Cho instead of Vacation Store. In Novice 1, our winner was Young Station, who was playing Bayou, Inquisition of Kozilek, and Slumbering Trudge. This is just one of many decks that takes Slumbering Trudge and combines it with a traditionally effective 3-card blind staple. Of course, with mana sources being so constrained in the format, Inquisition of Kozilek can deal with most decks, and even slower decks that bank mana using storage lands might be running something like Show and Tell or Doomsday Confluence that are going to be vulnerable to Inquisition of Kozilek despite these decks running slower plans. In Aspirant 4, our winner was Wieldernaut, who was playing Boseiju Who Endures, Hickory Woodlot, and Slumbering Trudge. Although this was the most popular deck this month, most of the players using it were higher elo because it was not a plainly obvious strategy. So kudos to Wieldernaut for identifying how powerful this deck was. In Aspirant 3, our winner was Arctuous, who was playing Bottomless Vault, Murderous Rider, and the Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale. Murderous Rider functions as a removal piece and a threat that is difficult to get rid of. The Tabernacle at Pendrell Vale is great at punishing depletion land decks, as well as token strategies that try to go wide. However, in this specific deck, it has an additional function, which is that it can kill your own Murderous Rider. If your opponent has a bigger threat than you, they might hold it in their hand hoping to force a tie by forcing you to commit your Murderous Rider to the board and therefore lose access to its removal capability. In this deck, you can commit your Murderous Rider to the board, and if your opponent does play a giant threat, you just allow your Murderous Rider to die, and then you can cast it as a removal spell the following turn after you've drawn it from your deck. In Aspirant 2, our winner was Felomare, who was playing Boseiju Who Endures, Hickory Woodlot, and Tender Wild Guide. Hickory Woodlot as a means to channel Boseiju is by no means exclusive to just Slumbering Trudge. And although Tender Wild Guide might not have all of the benefits that Slumbering Trudge has, it is a powerful scaling threat, and you still have the optionality to use Boseiju as additional mana to pay for something like a Daze. In Aspirant 1, our winner was Smacking Lips, who was playing Doomsday Confluence, Subterranean Hangar, Subterranean Hangar. This deck saw a glimpse of the spotlight last month, but this month it's really taken center stage. It being a scaling combination of board wipe and threat makes it one of the stronger slow decks in the format right now, in a meta that was particularly permissive of slower strategies. In Contender 7, our winner was Wooldude, who was also playing Doomsday Confluence, but was using Bottomless Vaults instead of Subterranean Hangars. And if you remember the piece of information we learned earlier, this difference does matter, and there was someone playing Petrified Hamlet in this pod, so it did contribute to this deck scoring higher than it would have if it was running Subterranean Hangar. In Contender 6, our winner was Nameless Dreamer, who was playing Boseiju Who Endures, Hickory Woodlot, and Slumbering Trudge. Arguably the most powerful deck in this meta, and dominant at all levels of play. In Contender 5, our winner was Defenestrator, who was playing Hammerheim, Heartfire Hero, and Maze of Ith. Although Heartfire Hero's Valiant ability can only trigger once per turn, it can trigger on both your turn and your opponent's turn. This means that if you don't need to use Maze of Ith for defense, you can use it for offense. You can attack with Heartfire Hero, allow it to go through for damage, and then untap it while it's still attacking. And yes, that's a bit strange to think about, but it is in fact how the combat phase works. This allows Heartfire Hero to grow twice as fast, and it benefits from a kind of pseudo-vigilance where it can attack and block in the same turn cycle. In Contender 4, our winner was Mr. Hungry, who was another Doomsday Confluence double storage land player who has brought with us another lesson about storage lands. Mr. Hungry was using both Bottomless Vault and Subterranean Hangar. At one point in time, this was an advisable choice. When Alpine Moon was legal, having two different lands prevented your opponent from turning off your entire game plan by naming one card. Alpine Moon is currently banned, so I am under the impression that 2 Subterranean Hangars is optimal, but somebody can let me know in the comments if there's a reason to run both Bottomless Vault and Subterranean Hangar. In Contender 3, our winner was Gleaming Moonlight, who was playing Bayou, Inquisition of Kozilek, and Slumbering Trudge. This is just further proof that running 2 generically powerful cards can take you a long way in the format. In Contender 2, we had a tie between Space Godzilla Fan and Paper Devil. Space Godzilla Fan was playing Erode, Savannah, and Slumbering Trudge. We haven't gotten to talk about Erode yet, but that is another powerful new card from Secrets of Strixhaven. Path to Exile is currently banned, and Erode isn't far off from Path to Exile in terms of what it does. The difference between Exile and Destroy is significant for the 3-card blind format, but Erode is definitely among the best options for 1-mana removal spells right now. Paper Devil was playing Boseiju, Hickory Woodlot, and Slumbering Trudge. I think you've gotten the point about this deck, but it is, once again, very, very powerful. In Contender 1, our winner was Die Please Thanks, who was playing Bottomless Vault, and Doomsday Confluence. Those are the correct storage lands, so this deck gets my seal of approval. And finally, in Exemplar, our winner was Uzak, who was playing Crystal Vein, Krenko, Tin Street Kingpin, and Mox Ruby. This isn't the fastest deck in the format, or even the fastest deck in this pod, but it is fast enough to have walloped the Slumbering Trudge decks that took up nearly a quarter of the Exemplar meta. You know, the number of powerful token-generating 3-mana goblins we've seen in the 3-card blind format is pretty astonishing. If we give it enough time, perhaps we will see every version of Krenko win an Exemplar pod someday. And with this win, Uzak has reclaimed the champion title with a whopping 1891 ELO rating. And with that, I'd like to congratulate all of our winners one more time before we move on to discussing the cards in this month's community ban vote. This month, as a community, you voted on these 6 cards to determine whether they would be added to the ban list or remain legal in the format. And to dive straight into things, Boseiju Who Endures, Slumbering Trudge, and Inquisition of Kozilek were all added to the ban list, and Doomsday Confluence, Show and Tell, and the Filigree Silex will remain legal. Let's start off by talking about the cards that weren't banned this month, beginning with Doomsday Confluence. Although Doomsday Confluence won several pods, many players attributed Doomsday Confluence's strengths to specifics of this meta that were unlikely to carry over into next month. For starters, Slumbering Trudge being positioned as a top card this month meant that it was likely that there would be plenty of opponents running slower strategies that are also vulnerable to the sacrifice mode on Doomsday Confluence. Also, Doomsday Confluence comes naturally prepared to deal with Boseiju by having an extra storage land available. You can tank a little bit of land destruction and still get to play the game. It's likely that Doomsday Confluence will continue to be strong in future metas, but this month was unusual enough that many players wanted to give it at least one more chance. Show and Tell was in a similar situation. Ever since it was unbanned back in September of 2025, Show and Tell has been a little bit too slow to have a major impact on the meta. This month may have been an exception because of the presence of Slumbering Trudge, but it's also worth noting that in general, many of the fastest decks in the format have been banned since the point in time that Show and Tell was unbanned. Although Show and Tell won 2 pods this month, it also was only submitted twice overall. So there is some reason to believe that we don't have enough data to really say how good Show and Tell actually is, and there is reason to believe that it was better positioned in this month than it would be in most months. And finally, we have the Filigree Silex, which was the closest vote that I think we may have ever seen in the history of this community. There were 124 voters, but a single additional vote could have flipped this in the other direction and gotten the Filigree Silex banned. Many players felt undecided about this card or otherwise voted neutrally, and the other votes were nearly perfectly balanced. The reason the card was being voted on was because the third most popular deck this month was Ancient Tomb, Elixir of Immortality, and the Filigree Silex, which performed very well with its ability to recur the Filigree Silex over and over to remove your opponent's threats, and inevitably closes out the game by doming your opponent for 10 twice. If it were banned, we could talk about how Ratchet Bomb would be a suitable replacement in decks that aren't using the Filigree Silex as a win condition, but it appears like we won't be having that conversation for at least another month. Boseiju was the 5th most popular card this month, and because of its powerful combination with Slumbering Trudge, it dominated the meta and lived up to its reputation as a previously banned card. Even if we were to exclude Slumbering Trudge from our analysis, it still would have put up an impressive performance. Although there may have been some players that would have been interested in seeing Boseiju stick around for another month, particularly if Slumbering Trudge were out of the picture, the majority of players felt they had seen enough and that it was time to go back on the ban list. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Slumbering Trudge was the most negatively voted on card this month. It was the most popular card this month by a significant margin and was part of the most popular and dominant deck in the month with its combination with Boseiju. I think very few players need to be convinced at this point, but if there was any doubt, it's worth mentioning that even the decks that did not use Boseiju performed very well. We saw Erode and Inquisition of Kozilek both win pods, and the second most popular deck this month was Daze, Slumbering Trudge, and Tropical Island. This big sleepy guy just stands head and shoulders over everything else in the format, and it deserves its place on the ban list. And our final card added to the ban list this month was Inquisition of Kozilek. Folks who have been following the format for a long time were probably suspecting that this card would be banned sooner or later. The format has a long history of 1-mana hand attack spells that cast a broad net getting banned because their performance was extraordinarily strong for cards that had such high expected baseline performances. Because of the nature of mana sources in the 3-card blind format, Inquisition of Kozilek's restriction of being able to only hit mana value 3 or lower cards is not as relevant as it might appear to be at first glance. While you're going first, you will hit decks that are running 1-drops, 2-drops off of Ancient Tomb or Depletion lands, and any deck that is running a Mox or a Ritual to cast its cards. The one category of deck that Inquisition of Kozilek may consistently miss on is storage land decks, but as we saw this month, plenty of storage land decks still get hit by Inquisition of Kozilek in cards like Doomsday Confluence and Show and Tell. With Inquisition of Kozilek being banned, the runner-up might be Dreadfugue. That jump from mana value 3 to mana value 2 is significant, but as I already covered, between 1-drop decks, Depletion land decks, Ancient Tomb decks, and decks that use Moxes or Rituals, Dreadfugue really has no shortage of targets. And before we wrap things up, we have to cover the outcome of the unbanned vote that supporters of this community have the privilege of participating in. Among the cards that were eligible to be unbanned this month, none of them received enough support to be removed from the ban list. And that wraps up the month of May. And with June right around the corner, it's time to get your brewing caps on and consider what you might submit in this upcoming event. Thanks for watching, everyone, and see you soon.